not sure if I'm scared or excited to make this video. We're just gonna have a little bit of a look through of what people have been asking the internet, which is always a very, very dangerous thing to do. But apparently I was feeling brave today. Why do orchestral musicians hate jazz? We don't hate jazz. I mean, obviously. No, why? Okay, orchestral musicians don't hate jazz as a general rule. The reason that this one has come up is because a lot of people say that orchestral musicians aren't as good as jazz players because we play off sheet music and it's all a bit more formal, and you know, and they say they can't improvise and all of those things. That is a gross generalization. Many orchestral musicians can improvise. I count myself as one of them, and so it can just be a little bit frustrating, I suppose, when people say, oh yes, but in jazz we just don't need the music and we do all of this. And don't get me wrong, jazz musicians are phenomenally skilled and phenomenally talented, but do we hate jazz? No, as a general rule we don't. It's just slightly frustrating when people try and make comparisons that just don't actually make sense, because then you're like, yeah, okay, that's great, but can you sight read a symphony? No? Okay. Pipe down then. Why do classical musicians need sheet music? So, primarily this is because the music that we play is extremely long and extremely complex, and if you don't have the tune, it is very difficult to memorize. Some orchestras have actually started doing some performances without any music, and I am in awe. I think that's incredibly impressive stuff to do. But yes, generally because of the volume of music that we have to learn, and because of the length of it and the complexity and all that kind of stuff. Also, because you're in a section, you've got to make sure that you all remember it exactly the same as each other, if that makes sense. It's just a lot easier to have the sheet music. And like I say, I mean, I rarely get told exactly what we're playing before the day of the concert sometimes. So I can't memorize an hour and a half's worth of music in one day. If anybody can, teach me your secrets. Okay, why do musicians wear black? So I actually answered this in more detail in last week's video, which I will have linked up here and also in the description box below. It's generally so that they don't detract from the music. If we're all wearing black, then we're part of this homogeneous whole, and therefore it's not about us, it's about the music. So if we're all wearing black, we just kind of, you know, blend into the background of what we're doing. So that's the primary reason. Why do classical musicians hate pop? Similar answer to the jazz music, really. I think a lot of musicians don't particularly enjoy pop music because it is harmonically and musically very simple. But that's sort of its point. I love listening to pop music because it's relaxing for me. I can sometimes struggle to listen to classical music and not sort of go into work mode. So I love listening to pop music because I find it very relaxing, because it is more simple on the ear and to the brain. I think they can just be a little bit scathing of it because of the whole four chord situation, and you know, a lot of pop music can sound very samey. Some of it's not great, but good pop music, totally down. What do orchestra musicians get paid? Okay, fair question. So this varies, and there is an MU rate, which I will have that linked down below because it's actually really interesting information, and that is what orchestras should be paying. Now, not all orchestras do, but as a member of the MU, I have to be careful, because if I took a gig that wasn't paid by the MU and wasn't covered by them, if then say they didn't pay me for whatever reason, the MU would say, well, that's on you. We won't help you because you took that work that isn't paid what it should be, and obviously they exist to make sure that orchestras are paid fairly. But it kind of ranges for a Saturday concert, it kind of ranges from about like 140 to 180, depending on the orchestra in question. For session work and things like that though, it's quite a bit more. So yeah, I can do a more detailed video on that if you would like, but yeah, for orchestras it's about 140, 180, that kind of ballpark. Why are classical musicians so arrogant? I didn't know we were. I'm so sorry if this is your impression of us. Goodness me. Why are they so arrogant? Musicians can be snobs, to put it mildly. They've worked incredibly hard to do what they do. And I think for some people, this can lend them an air of superiority, which I don't always think is earned. So they can just get a bit tortured artist vibes, and I think that's why they can sometimes come across arrogant. In the same way that they can be quite disparaging of, you know, pop music and things like that. It can come across very kind of uppity, and 99% of orchestral musicians are not like that. They are lovely, very semi-normal people. Why are classical musicians depressed? Oh goodness, you guys have a really, really good opinion of us, don't you? Because it's hard. It's really, really tough. This industry is wonderful and a joy to be a part of most of the time, but it can be brutal, and I think historically it has been more so. I think we are making really, really good strides on trying to be a bit more human about it. If you go through a quiet patch, you're not getting a lot of work, then financially it can be very, very difficult. And also, it's a lot of time away from friends and family. If you don't have friends and family that understand the demands of your job, but also the timings of your job, then that can be really difficult, because you're often working on weekends and evenings, and that can then be difficult to cultivate friendships and community and relationships off the back of that. I think that's probably a few reasons. Why do musicians wear earpieces when performing? Okay, fair enough. We will, if we are doing pop music based stuff, or if you're working with electric instruments like guitars or vocalists, we will often have what we call in-ears, in-ear monitors. And this is basically playing what is happening right into our ears. And the brilliant thing about having those is that you can sort of set the levels so that you can hear more of what you want to hear, because if you've got somebody who has an electric instrument, it's just being blasted out the front, so you can't actually hear it, and obviously you need to be able to hear it to know what they're doing so that you can be in time with them. Yeah, so it's just to help us hear what's going on. Why do musicians die young? Oh, because the lifestyle cannot be the healthiest. I think, again, I do think this is getting better, but historically there have been quite a lot of sort of drugs and alcohol involved, and like I say, I see very little of that in my line of work, but yeah, it's they don't always look after themselves the best. Why do musicians use drugs? Again, I think this is just, it's part of what used to be the culture of being a musician, was that you'd sort of work hard, play hard, and there are certain things that come with that, but I will say that not all musicians are on drugs. Why do musicians do encores? Okay, so we do encores when the audience wants one. We don't always. They're more common in film music, concerts and things like that. You're more likely to do an encore, or if a soloist is on a concerto, they then might do an encore, which is like a solo work. And it's just kind of a little bit of bonus music if the audience wants it, because if the audience is really, really enjoying what they see, we often get, you know, they want us to play more, which is wonderful, and we very much appreciate it. But yeah, it's literally just as a little bonus, as a thank you. It's often something a bit shorter, a bit more light-hearted. The soloist will often do something that's quite virtuosic, but maybe like a little bit funny, so it shows a bit more of their personality, that kind of thing. Why do musicians die at 27? I mean, I'm 30, so we don't all die at once. That's so weird. Why do musicians wear sunglasses? Because it looks cool, okay? Can musicians claim instruments on tax? Yes. So if you are a freelance musician, then you are responsible for paying your own tax at the end of the year. And there are a lot of things that you can sort of claim against your tax. And one of these things is obviously equipment. So if you buy a new instrument, then yes, you can claim that on tax, which is helpful. Can musicians make a living? This is something which I get asked less now, I think just because I've been doing this career for a while, so people are like, well, I mean, you're still doing it, so you must be making a living. But yes, you absolutely can. There are things about it that make it tricky, like the unreliability of the work, and particularly when you're starting out, I would highly recommend that you have another job at the same time, one that's maybe quite flexible so that you can take your playing work. But yes, it is absolutely possible. It isn't easy, and it's not for the faint-hearted, so you have to really, really want it and really love it. And also you have to be very honest with yourself about your ability and whether you are actually going to be able to sustain this long term. Can musicians be tone deaf? Controversially, I'm gonna say, I would say no, not really. So being tone deaf means that you can't identify the different pitches in music. So if you listen to a tone deaf person singing, they will sound like they're just singing sort of one note, but in their head they're singing different notes, and so they can't actually tell the difference. It would be very difficult. I think a tone deaf person could probably play something like the piano, because you don't actually need to be able to hear what you're playing. As long as you know where, you know, D is, for example, you can't get that wrong. Does that make sense? But you definitely couldn't sing or play a string instrument or woodwind, anything where you have to be in control of the pitch. So yeah, sadly I would say probably not. Can musicians dance? So this is actually quite funny. A lot, not all, in a lot of cases, musicians are actually not very good at dancing, and it's quite a well-known phenomenon, which you would think they would be very good. They often have very good rhythm, but they're not used to moving in that way. So yeah, often they're actually not that great at dancing. Obviously, not always. Can musicians make money without touring? Again, I suppose this is talking more about bands and things like that. I would say for a band, it's much more difficult to make money without touring, because if you stay in the same spot, obviously your audience pool is significantly limited. So I would say it's probably going to be very, very difficult for you. But as a classical orchestra musician, then no, you don't have to go on tours to make money. But yeah, I understand the question. Last one. Why do orchestras need a conductor? Oh, this question comes up all the time. Yes, so orchestras need a conductor because when you are sat in an orchestra, you can't hear everything that's happening, so you can't really stay connected with all of the players on stage. So the conductor is the focal point, and they keep you all together, they keep you in time, and they just kind of lead the musicality of what's going on. They're also responsible for taking the rehearsal. Prior to the concert, they will work through what they think we need to practice and work on, and it's their responsibility to do that. So yes, they are very, very important people. Some think they're too important, but you know, as much as it pains me to admit it, they are quite important. Why do orchestras tune to the oboe? So the oboe has a very good sound for cutting through things. Not physically, obviously, the sound cuts through, so everyone can hear it really well. And they can also hold a really steady note, so it's easy to tune to. Why do orchestras play behind the beat? Some orchestras do this more than others. I can't really tell you why. It just seems to be a stylistic thing. Again, it's sort of to do with everybody being together. There's always going to be a slight delay between the conductor telling you to do something and it happening. But like I say, some orchestras do this to a greater extent than others. It's not always intentional either. Probably worth saying. Why do orchestras have so many violins? Excellent question. I would also like to know this. It's because the violins are split into two. So you have the first violins and the second violins, and they are playing different parts. I'm not entirely sure where that came from though. So excellent question. I'll do some research and let you know. Why do orchestras tune to A? Oh, really, really good question. So this is because all string instruments have an A string. So historically they would have tuned to the principal violinist's A, and then you can tune the rest of your strings from there. And then as other instruments kind of joined the orchestra, they stuck with that. So yeah, it's been a very, very, very long-standing thing. But yes, it's the string player's fault. I could keep going with this all day. I love answering these questions. They do make me laugh. But I will finish this video here so as to not make it a million hours long. But if you have any other questions, as always, comment them down below and I will get straight back to you, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.